Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you for joining us on Insight.
We're still in the wake of May 29, with most states celebrating or marking their, most state governors, I beg your pardon, marking their first year in office, just as the federal government. We're still in that spirit, and so here on Insight, we would reflect, the mood of the nation. Incidentally, Elizabeth Omori will be taking lead on this episode. Elizabeth?
Yeah, so much has been said about the achievements of the present administration under President Bola Tinubu. We will sustain the conversation and dwell on his economic policies for development. We will be hearing from a businessman how these policies have shaped the Nigerian business space. Also, we will be talking about the importance of words to bridging the walls of peace in Africa, roles words play in resolution, and how words can be used to hold governments accountable.
Very well then. Like I said earlier, we would also be revisiting a conversation we had last week that basically threw up the imperatives for moving beyond politics, into good governance. But of course, we would kickstart this program properly when we return after this break. And like I said, Elizabeth will be taking the lead.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of agreements in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
President Bola Tinubu says his administration remains steadfast in implementing necessary economic reforms to facilitate business growth and create investment opportunities that support Nigeria's growing population. The policy direction of the APC-led government under President Tinubu is aimed at repositioning the country. Reforms in security, education, economy, and other sectors may be tough, but many Nigerians say the gains would bring about enduring development. President Tinubu also reaffirmed his commitment to creating an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, emphasizing that his administration's focus on investing in key sectors is underpinned by the need to ensure the welfare and prosperity of Nigerians. Many Nigerians say Mr. President has demonstrated strong will to return the nation's economy to its glorious days and put critical sectors on the right trajectory for growth and progress. How do we sustain these gains? My guest will analyze these successes. And it's Teso David Ukechu, a businessman and chairman grassroots support for Tinubu 2027, the 1019 initiative. Mr. David, thank you so much for joining us on Insight.
Thank you very much.
All right, I think I'd like to begin our conversation with the support group. How did you come about this and what is the drive?
Thank you so much for having me. One of the reasons, there's several other reasons, but one of the great reasons was this. I said, look, what can I give back to my country? Like one of the slogans I'm using on one of the billboards across the country and supporting Mr. President is that if Nigeria fails, if President Tinubu fails, Nigeria fails. Now, I said, look, he has, constitutionally, he has 4 years to go. And if we do not support him, and I'm complaining every day, or I have friends and family members who are complaining every day that he is not doing well, what have I done? What can I give back? So I decided to say, look, if the president succeeds, I will succeed. And this is where that seed of supporting President Tinubu to succeed came from.
Now, let's assess his administration. How would you assess his administration? Would you give it a pass?
Resounding pass.
Okay.
Now, you know, let me take you to one good example. I'm a businessman, I'm a manufacturer, for instance. We have been battling with the issue of double taxation, for instance. Now, this president came in, he looked at the business environment and said, look, what is the challenge of the business family? He set up a committee to look into that, the issues of taxation. That is a president that cares for the economy, for the people and the welfare of its citizens. So, this is just one example. The second one is, look at the coastal road from Atlantic, from Lagos to Calabar, for instance. This project, going through 9 states, I just give you an example of the value of land, the value of property, filling stations, agricultural produce that will come in from those areas into other, in other words, the economic boost and benefit is enormous. No one was ready to, none of the recent presidents were ready to take this head on. He did it. To my surprise, you know, gentlemen, great people that I respect so much, thought otherwise, that this project was not profitable and it was too expensive. What Nigerians want, and President Tinubu is delivering, is what they will feel, see, and profit out of it, which this great road is one of those that Nigerians will put smiles on the faces of Nigerians.
I know there are several challenges aside double taxation that you face. There's also the issue of, we have branding, we have Nigerians contending with imported products into the country. Let me digress a little to the issue of made in Nigeria products before we dwell more on where to place premium. Do you see this administration tackling this issue?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Our president happens to be one of, among, you know, a great leader that understands that made in Nigerian products are the way forward. He has brought up some policies that, you know, say, look, certain government offices and certain organizations, government organizations, must have to patronize locally made brands. Because one thing about this, Nigeria is doing very well. And you see, we need to build confidence and help the manufacturers, as Mr. President is making or creating and you know, policies that will be able to help manufacturers. Sometimes some people in Nigeria, some companies in Nigeria are actually producing in Nigeria and branding made in China. And I asked them what's the reason. And they told me that, look, because people prefer to buy when they see made in Nigeria. But this president is looking into that. He was furious when he heard about this, and he's directed his Minister of Trade to look into this. This is a man who cares about this country. This is somebody who cares about. Let me give you an example. I remember one president in one country who said the young people are lazy. Our president have continually, repeatedly said that the future of this country is the youth, and they are great you know, great gift to our country.
Interesting. Now, so much successes have been recorded in critical areas. As a businessman, which area do you think should premium be placed to ease business in Nigeria, to provide a thriving environment for Nigerians, Nigerian businessmen and women to thrive? But if you look at all the sectors critically making inputs, making impacts, which should have premium? Which should premium be placed on?
Transportation.
Okay.
You know, so if you look at great economies, China, the Americans, Europe, what facilitate and make trade easy is transportation. Majority logistics in country. So the president came in, he did not even wait for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. He immediately understands the importance of road, rail, and he has taken it head on. So now you can imagine, I mean, there are two actually vital roads that Mr. President is, undertaking at the same time. The one from Victoria Island to Calabar and the other one from Badagry to Sokoto. This is going round, and I believe he has plans. This is what I know. He has plans to take from Calabar to Taraba, Adamawa, Meduguri. Now, you can just imagine the logistic ease for businesses. Now, let me tell you why your products are expensive in the market and why we're having challenges of tomatoes moving from the north to the west, and the prices are high.
Cost and
Transportation. Transportation. He understands this. But you see, we are impatient. I am impatient as well because I want things done immediately. Things were rusty when he came in. But look at those decisions that he has taken. We can't feel it immediately, but very soon we're going to feel. So that will crash the prices of commodities and the raw materials, food, trade basically. So this is one most important one that is within the circle of my influence, which I'm a business and a manufacturer, and I know that the reason why I have to pay so much money for my raw materials to come in from Lagos to Benue or other locations that I'm taking my products, the chunk that takes out of my profit is transportation. And one of the reasons is because of bad roads. But this president is here, great man, a man who loves Nigeria, is taking it head on to solve that problem. We need to support him and be patient a little bit. You have, SMEs, young people, mothers and sisters who are doing businesses, people who are coming up to be greater business people, going through the process of growth, and you have this double taxation, which no president of this Federal Republic of Nigeria looked at and felt it was important to deal with. President Ahmed Tinubu have seen and felt the pain of the common people and has decided to deal with the issue of taxation. How much more? What more will he do for you to show his support? This is someone who cares about Nigeria. This is someone who cares about business people. So that's the very important aspect that he has taken head on. No respect of person, and I respect and I love him for that.
Okay, so how do we sustain these achievements? Because this is just 1 year, and he's done so much.
So this is what I feel. Sustainability depends on the people. So sustainability is a continuous thing, and we should hope, because hope is now, and I believe that whoever is going to come over, take over from President Tinubu will continue and sustain this wonderful things that he's doing.
Okay. All right. There are several economic policies being put in place to make business more friendly in Nigeria. But how favorable are these policies, and are we taking advantage of these policies?
Well, so when you say we, that's...
And I ask because you're a businessman. That's why I'm asking.
Yes. When so we, I mean, it all depends on the sector and the individual and what they do. But I can tell you, we already are enjoying most of these policies. It's just that, some might feel that, okay, it is not in my area of interest, and so it's not getting to me at the moment. But then, look, let me show you one example. The approach to, the foreign affairs, our relationship with other nations, and I love to bring this up. I love talking about aviation because, you see, we're trying to turn Nigeria into a global giant that she is. Because this is the creator of humanity. This is where it all began. So I talk about the means that takes us to the world and project us to the world. Which one is the aviation industry? And if you look at example, the body language of a president tells so much about his thinking and his vision. If you are tuned in, is a true president that believes in this country. It's the only president that believes in this country that will be able to do this. Countries have been careful on how they treat Nigerian business people and Nigerian brands. And I'm proud of my president because this is what you demonstrate to say, I am the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So let me just digress a little bit. If you say you love Nigeria for a minute, look at this. You want to be president. Okay, do you want to come and meet a broken house, or you want to meet a house that has been built so that you will continue building? How do you demonstrate your love? Is it by destroying? No. And this is why I encourage all political parties, come together. Come, let's support President Tinubu, because when it gets to your time eventually, if it's by the power of the Creator, then others will support you. That is how we show love. So I'm encouraging you. We are the young ones. So please, let's support the president. It's our country. If we destroy it, we need to come together with those great ideas and your wealth and what the Creator has given to you. Let's support and build for the good of our children and for the good of Mother Nigeria.
I'm happy you mentioned, you actually said we are the young ones. Okay. Now, for the young ones, young entrepreneurs coming up, the budding ones coming up, in boosting Nigeria's business space, how should they leverage these policies? Because capital is an issue.
I think the president has great, from the information I have, the president is working out something that, and one example is, this is the first president has introduced a student loan in Nigeria. People are not even talking about this. People are not even talking about this. Do you know what it means? That your child, the woman selling moi moi, akara, firewood, our great mothers, strong energy of our country. They don't need mansion. They don't want to buy a house in Dubai, in UK, live in Murphy or whatever. They just want their child to go to school. They go through this pain and process. Today, a great man has made it possible for their child to go to school, take a loan. Tell me, this is for the young people. This is the president that has love for the young children of this great Mother Nigeria. What should we do? Support him.
Interesting. Now, before we talk about you giving our words of advice to our young entrepreneurs, let's talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Are we utilizing this agreement for our businesses effectively? Because some African countries will tell you implementation is an issue.
So this is a very good question from you, and I'm very excited to answer this question. Now, without the public even knowing, Mr. President is secretly working, has a committee in place that is working to make sure that we take full advantage of this opportunity, because it has a downside and a good side. So Mr. President wants to push for the good side so that we take, because you see, there is nothing that we can't produce in Nigeria. And this is a president that is pushing forward and saying, look, if you want mineral resources from Nigeria, you must come and establish here. What does that mean? Our manufactured finished products will find its way in Kenya, in Rwanda, in South Africa. Right now, it's even happening. Businesses are exporting. I export from Nigeria as well. But this is a president. So you see, Mr. President is not this. You see, what I love about this Baba is this. He's not coming out to make noise. But you see, anytime he comes, he talks about the love. How can it? So let me tell you. There's one slogan I have on the billboards that I've put around the country. He said, "Do not condemn your country." See the narrative. You see the spirituality and the power behind those words. It only can come from a man who genuinely have love for his country, who means well, the tenacity to build but not to destroy.
I'm really tempted to end this conversation, but I'll ask you one more question. I would need you to give some advice to young entrepreneurs coming up so that they can cash in and enjoy some of these economic policies the federal government has put in place to make our business environment much stronger and competitive.
So my young ones, look, there is what is called process. Whatever you want to achieve, you must start small. The greatest thing that will happen to you as a young fellow is to fail. Do you know why failure is the best? And I know Nigerians are very, very, very smart and intelligent. Now, this is what failure does to you. You learn. You grow organically. This is not theory, what you have read. Look, let me tell you, education is the best thing that will happen to you, but prepare yourself. That is one of the tools that you need. But the physical experience of whatever you believe in have started, as it failed, you learn. Do not give up. Do not give up. There is no great man on earth or in this country that has grown organically, that has not failed more than 10 times. So I'm encouraging you, if you believe in it, love your country, support your country, you will grow. Achieve anything you want to achieve. Thank you.
Tessa David Okechir, a businessman, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Inside this week, and thank you for your insightful contributions. Thank you very much.
I do really appreciate for inviting me. It's a wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much.
And talking about May 29, with state governments marking their first day in office, that is the new ones, and the federal government also doing the same, I thought it was important to throw up a conversation on the imperatives for moving beyond politics into good governance. I had an interesting conversation with a public policy advocate, Dr. Nnemeka Umere from the United States. It was quite an engaging one. Let's bring you that conversation. Let me bring in my guest, Dr. Nnemeka Umere, a public policy advocate based in the United States. He runs a non-partisan think tank, aiding policymakers in research and advocacy, research and education as well. He is a professor of medicine in the United States. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. Last time you were on the program, I think we talked about politics and governance, and this time we're doubling down on the issue. It is great to have you join us on the program.
Thank you so very much for having me, and thank you, Nigerians, for joining. Thank you, everybody all over the world that is participating in this conversation. I appreciate it. All
right, Doc. I think it would be important to historically review political power transition in Nigeria, maybe until the collapse of the Third Republic, and just oppose that, against the last 25 years of the Fourth Republic. In your opinion, how significant is it to note that the process, even though we know it's ongoing, that Nigeria has seemingly and is increasingly evolving a strong democratic culture of peaceful transition of power in recent years? Especially when you think and you put that against what transpired under military rule in this same country.
Well, thank you for the question. I have to start by giving Nigeria a big, like this America, I have to give its applause. This is the longest time that we have experienced democratic regime, given our very young age. It's been going on for 25 years now, and I pray it goes on for 200 plus years, just like it happens in America. There is peaceful transition of power. Sometimes what happened during the election is also can be questionable in terms of who won and who didn't win. You know, if you our late President Idua actually came out and confessed that the way he came into power was kind of crooked. But having said that, though, there was still peaceful transition. And Nigeria has witnessed transition from one political party to the other political party, have witnessed transition intra-party. So these are all good things. And it's also worthy of note that we're still very young in this process. You know, the country, the United States of America, where we're trying to get our democratic concepts and ideas from. They've been doing this for over 200 plus years. So I would say very, very good job, and as far as transition of power is concerned to Nigeria.
So relatively young, but nonetheless significant. I mean, that's quite something to go on. Now, Doc, I know politics is the vehicle or medium through which the attainment of all forms of representative or people-oriented leadership is attained. But is it necessarily an ingredient for good governance? Is there a supposition that politics breeds good governance? Otherwise, we could as well say that, you know, every political process involves good leadership. So, Doc, I need you to tell me this. Can politics be modeled to largely throw up good leaders as a culture and as a system?
Absolutely. Compared to the three regime, if it is practiced correctly, it's a who doesn't know, and the way to within who is qualified in every respect to lead the country, as opposed to the military regime where, you know, only one person can just say, okay, you here, this is your position, you go be the administrator of Anambra State, or you go be the administrator of Lagos State. You know, in the political dispensation, people get to participate to pick who their leaders are. That is the concept. And that is a very good concept. You know, that way the best of the minds are supposedly picked to lead the polity.
So when you say the qualifying process for leadership, and I'd like to take you back there, and you've used the key word there, supposedly, the best supposedly emerging, and then you say the qualifying process for leadership. Do you perhaps want to link that to political party operations and the way leadership, you know, emerges right from political parties before they are put out there for the people to decide who, I mean, or whose policy or whose ideas they are most comfortable with? Perhaps this whole, you know, leadership emergence process from the political parties just before, you know, these candidates are, you know, handed over and presented to the people. Do you perhaps want to go back and maybe double down on that?
Well, yes. You know, in policy, in principle, that's what is supposed to happen. But unfortunately, in the Nigerian process so far, and again, I have to remind you again that I've said that the process is still very, you know, Nigeria is still very young in this process. I believe that it will, with time, mature. But at the present time, the way it is practiced tends to actually exclude some people, and because it is so monetized. You know, you cannot run for an office from the State House of Assembly to Senate to presidency. It's very expensive in Nigeria. As opposed to here, you can actually be the president of America, for instance, without being a rich person. You know, and American government has shown it time and time and again. The most recent one we remember is Barack Obama. Barack Obama was just a college, a professor, and then he was and there's a word for it, I forgot. But the important thing is that he was not a wealthy man, right? He was actually raised by a single mother,
Yes,
right?
true.
He and so on and so forth. But this to attract those that can help. And when you hear them talk and when you hear them spew their policies and their convictions, then people will know who they are. And then, so it doesn't take a lot of money out of pocket here. In Nigeria, unfortunately, it is not so. But I pray that as time goes on, those will start improving and getting better, where people can actually run for office based on what they know, not necessarily based on how deep their pockets are.
True again. I would like to apologize to our viewer for the quality of the connection there. We seem to be having some issues with your connection from the United States, but let's hope it gets better so we can have a robust conversation. So I think it will be good for us to talk about building institutions. If for nothing, I know that part of why the democratic culture is that ingrained, and should I use the word solid where you are, is because of institutions. So let's talk a bit about building these institutions and how that again, involves the political class, the leaders, the civil society, and even the people themselves. They say institutions outlive leaders and that they are ideal reminders of how society operates. Put that within the context of justice, of human rights, transparency, accountability, and perhaps the rule of law. And, and tell us how all of these conditions can ensure a good leadership and governance irrespective of what party or what groups takes over political power in Nigeria.
So the institution in this case, I would say, is the populace. That's what it should be. And then, I liken it to when you're trying to build a house. You have to lay the foundations first. And that foundation is now what determines the longevity of that house. If the foundation is not appropriately laid, the house will collapse ultimately. So what happens is that, say, for instance, in Nigeria now, I keep going back to the fact that we are copying the American system. We're adopting the American system. There are three key institutions. Those are codependent and independent of each other: the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. And the way to be done is that those three arms of government are not supposed to be subservient to the other part.
That's all.
And what happens is that all three of them are responsible for and to the populace, the governed. And what they're supposed to be doing is to be doing things that benefit the governed. So because there are these checks and balances, say, for instance, as you have seen in this country, if the executive is not doing something right, the legislative arm can impeach, right? If the judiciary is not doing something right, the legislative arm can also impeach. In this, it's in the Constitution that, for instance, the Chief Justice of the United States can be impeached by Congress, and so on and so forth. Congress can make a decision that the executive doesn't like, the executive can override. So by so doing, everybody is kept in check. This is what I see, at least at the at the expression of it. This is still going on in Nigeria. These three arms of government are supposed to be co-equal and independent. But then you find out that, again, we're still evolving. But then you find out that in some situations, for instance, say like the governors tend to be overly powerful in Nigeria, for instance, and they tend to do basically what they please, knowing that the executive, the legislative arm tends to be cowing to the executive. Frankly, I hate this. The judiciary is not really having a very good image overseas in Nigeria as it stands. So until those things are tweaked and people really see that it is working, democracy can actually be a very beautiful system of government.
I mean, I get what you're referencing there in terms of, you know, separation of powers, rule of law, and how it might also impact on justice and other conditions, democratic conditions that I enumerated earlier. But, you know, aside some of these issues that you've raised, I have also struggled with quite a number of issues as well, you know. Sometimes, you know, this with the practice of politics in Nigeria, especially when I reflect on the products of the relationships between, and this is just an example, you know, and, you know, between supposed political godfathers and sons, maybe. And, you know, but I put this against what should ordinarily translate to as political leadership mentoring. And that is exactly where I'm going to. The role of political leadership mentoring in democratic culture. I take a look at countries like China, and India. These are examples of nations which have harnessed and optimized suitable leadership mentoring processes to raise and nurture leaders who have gone on to facilitate the growth and development of their respective nations. Dr. Umeria, does it appear to you like leadership mentoring here in Nigeria is thoroughly based on, you know, these values of transparency, values of accountability, perhaps responsibility, productivity, and maybe, let's add, efficiency, you know, on the mentees? If not, shouldn't that be the case?
You know, I would say that for the most part, I see a lot of mentee mentorship in Nigerian system. There are, you know, go say, for instance, our current president now, we all know that he was an MK or Abiola mentee, for instance. So those happen, but where it gets to the extreme, then, you know, like the words that you're using, the political godfatherism, that is very, almost shameful. You know, that one person will pick somebody and impose that person on the people. That is almost military regime. They're almost practicing military dictatorship, even though they're in suits. And we all know that there are countless examples of them in our dear country, Nigeria. We all know what is currently going on in Rivers State between Fubara and you know, we all know what is going on in Kaduna, and so on and so forth. You know, that aspect of political mentorship has to be checked. And to me, that also points to what is wrong with our election system at this very time. You know, because if the people are really to choose, that will completely eliminate that godfatherism. But unfortunately, that's what I was saying. I was going back to the point that some people get so powerful that they will handpick one person and insert that person regardless, you know, and that includes manipulating the election results with impunity. You know, that I'm sure with time will stop, because we're beginning to see that it doesn't, you know, whoever puts somebody in, with a very few exceptions, the person turns around and they become enemies. So maybe, hopefully, this will start teaching our people that this is not the right way to pick leadership in a country.
Dr. Umera, you know,
yes,
we've talked about this whole issue. I'd like for us to, maybe just before, because we won't end this program without me asking you your opinion on the first year anniversary of Mr. President Bola Tinubu. But just before that, still on this whole issue of going beyond the symbolism of May 29 and in building a resilient, you know, culture of good governance in Nigeria, I am wondering, our focus should shift, or perhaps do you think at this point that we probably should be focusing more on building capacity for our growing youth population, political capacity now, and more generically, and perhaps also engender a system of inclusion for young persons, for youth, and maybe more women, in issues of politics and governance in the country?
If you ask me, in principles, definitely, the system should find a way to bring up the youth and women. Absolutely, in principles, yes. In practice, I think it might take something like a constitutional review or amendment.
Actually, we do have laws in practice. Well, maybe in practice, but in principle, and there are legislations that back and engender, youth participation in politics. There's the Not Too Young to Run law, which
yes.
of course now,
yes.
engenders that.
Yes.
And then we also know that some political parties also go beyond that to perhaps maybe reduce cost of nomination forms for young persons and all of that. But in spite of all of that, we still see a culture of, that doesn't really allow young persons, young people, or younger persons, and women, more especially, to be part of this process.
That is my point exactly. They may say not too young to run and all that, but me and you know that in practice that's not what happens. Again, it goes back to what I was saying about too much monetization of the political process in our country, and also too much who you know in the selection process. Again, this will evolve. I honestly, you have to give Nigeria the kudos. If you compare Nigeria at 25 years of democracy to America at 25 years of democracy, the American system of democracy at the time was worse, much, much worse than what we have in Nigeria. Nigerians are very smart, very resilient, and I know with time things will sort itself out. I am very, very sure of that. I'm very, very sure of that. As sure as I know my name, Nigerians have a way of sorting things out, and sooner or later it will happen.
Dr. Nemeka Omera, Professor of Medicine, Public Policy Advocate, I'd like to thank you so much for your deep insights into this issue. I'm looking forward to having more conversations on more exciting discourse as in issues with you, and hopefully we will get you back into the studio when the need arises. Thank you so much for being part of our program.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Our time now to rejoin Elizabeth Omorui. This time around, she will be talking about building bridges through words of peace.
Peace building is an activity that aims to resolve injustice in non-violent ways and to transform cultural and structural conditions that generate deadly or destructive conflict. It revolves around developing constructive, personal, group and political relationships across ethnic, religious, class, national and racial boundaries. The process includes violence prevention, conflict management, resolution or transformation, and post-conflict reconciliation or trauma healing before, during, and after any given case of violence. Today, we will examine the power of words in bridging walls of peace and how soft words could actually change a narrative for the better. And my guest, Kayode Yusuf, Director-elect, Toastmasters International, District 130, will speak to us. Kayode, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, in bridging the walls of peace with words, it actually sounds figurative. How real is this?
Yes, thank you very much. Words are powerful, and words create a perception of how we think and how we do things. So, yes, words are very important in bridging peace. Also because when you get to speak, you're speaking from the heart. It's the things that you have in your heart that you actually would speak out. So this makes the words that we say very important. Also, how we get to say these words. So yes, words are important in bridging peace in any situation.
In any situation. What exactly is your own definition of peace? Let's begin from there.
Well, peace would mean a lot of things. In some cases, peace would mean an absence of conflicts. Peace would mean when there's conviviality amongst a group of people, friends, organizations, nations. So I would say peace is the absence or the management of conflicts between a group or set of people.
Okay. So how do we use words to solve conflicts, to make people see reasons not to engage in violence?
Yes, thank you. First, I would say, how do we use words themselves to prevent conflicts? Sometimes the conflict actually comes from the way issues are being presented. We're humans and we're created with problems. This means that problems would always come up.
Of course.
But how do we present that issue that we want to discuss? Sometimes the way we present the issue could actually be the issue, the thing that actually generates the conflict, not what we think exactly is the conflict. So I would say that first, presentation of issues can be a way to prevent conflict. Now, going into conflict resolution itself, yes, if there is a conflict, first of all, words can be used to prevent conflict. Words that promote peace, words that are positive-minded, could actually diffuse whatever situation it is that we are dealing with. For instance, there are issues that could happen and you hear people say, oh, I can't do this, we must do this. Words like this have the potential to generate conflict because it sort of is not taking into consideration the views of the other people. So instead of using words like we must, I can't, it's better to use words that promote cooperation, to say, oh, come, let's have this discussion. What do you think about what it is that we are discussing? That way, the other party assumes that, yes, my view is important. So even if your view is going to be taken at the end of the day, the other party feels aired that, yes, this does not go my way, but at least I've had my say. So words are important in resolving conflicts.
Okay. Now, from your explanation, it means that the lever of words, very important, and then more importantly, words have a way of either pulling you down or lifting you up. Now, words have ways they affect us, either positively or negatively. For a region like Africa, holding people accountable begins with words. Holding our leaders accountable.
Yeah, thank you very much. In terms of leadership, I would say that first, the followers need to, if I can put it this way, upgrade themselves to understand the issues on ground. In our own case, politically, we would see politicians come every 4 years to come tell the electorate sweet words with the hope of having the votes of those electorates. I think that it is important for the followers themselves to first come to the understanding of the polity. These things that this person is offering to us, are they actually realizable? When the follower comes to this realization, then the issue of engagement can come in. When the political leaders come to campaign to us, we need to be able to tell them without creating conflicts, because political seasons in these regions are usually very explosive. So what we're looking at is not causing problems. What we are looking at is having a conversation. You said you're going to do ABC. To the best of our knowledge, ABC is not possible. So can you tell us, can you explain to us what your process is going to be like? How do you plan to achieve these things? What are the milestones? What are the timelines that you want to use to achieve these things that you've promised to us? When you ask questions like this, it's going to be very easy for you to decipher who is telling a lie or who is telling the truth. So yes, words can be used to engage our leaders to ensure that when they come to give us these promises, the promises they're coming to give to us are realistic and achievable.
Realistic and achievable. Now, you actually build the confidence of people when it comes to talking. Could you give us some tips?
Yeah, thank you very much. When it comes to speaking confidently, There are two things that I usually would recommend. The first is fundamental. You can't do without it. And that is the content of what it is that you want to talk about. When you need to speak to people, it has to be subjects that you have some competency in. It has to be a subject that you are able to communicate to people about. It has to be a subject where if there are problems, you're able to solve that problem. So I call that the content part. You must understand the content part. A good example is if you want to talk about an engineer that wants to build a bridge. This engineer needs to understand what it takes to build a bridge. He needs to understand what the materials are that you need to use to build a bridge. He needs to understand what the weather situations are. Are you building this bridge on water or are you building it on land? All of these are things that people who are not experts in that field may not be able to understand. Now, that is the content part. The next part would now be the context part, which exactly is the problem. A lot of times we see people who understand the content. They are experts in their field. However, they are not able to communicate these issues in their field to people who are not experts in their field. And that's the context part. The context has to do with how you say the things that you say. For instance, there are things like vocal variety that you could use to communicate whatever it is that you're communicating. If you need to do something urgently, it needs to reflect in your voice. And this actually communicates to the people that you're speaking about that this issue we're discussing at the moment is an issue of urgency. If you need to communicate affection, for instance, love, it would reflect in your voice. If you're communicating sadness, it needs to also reflect in your voice. Your gestures, the gestures that you use, the vocal colloquiums that you use, things like using rhetorical devices, all of these enrich whatever it is that you're saying and ensures that the people that you're speaking with get to enjoy whatever it is that you're discussing with them. Outside these, there's also the place of practice. Sometimes we have the technical competence of speaking of what we actually want to talk about. But when you come to the front of an audience, there's always that part of nervousness. We call it the butterflies that flutters within your tummy. This nervousness is natural to humans. Practice would ensure that you get to align those butterflies so that when they flutter, they actually would fly in an organized pattern. So practice is also something that's very important. And then finally, it's also important that you have a supportive environment to practice with. When you practice in front of a mirror, like people would usually do, it's different from when you actually stand in front of an audience to speak. You need to be able to gauge the view of your audience. You need to be able to gauge how your audience feels about what you're saying. You need to be able to gauge the response of your audience. You need to be able to even to engage your audience when you're speaking with the audience. So these are some of the tips that I would have to anybody who wants to speak confidently in front of an audience.
Kayode Yusuf, Director-elect, Toastmasters International, District 130. I want to thank you so much for enlightening us on Insight this week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much.
And that's it on this episode of the program. To join us same time next week for more on Insight. My name is Nnamdi Adipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.